2003 is best known for her work in Spicks and Specks, Good News Week, and most recently, The Great Australian Bake Off. Her management agency announced her death today, saying her generosity, talent, and friendship have been constants in the Australian comedian scene for the last 20 years. Wilson is survived by her husband Chris and her son Digby, and our thoughts are with them.
Elon Musk has been issued a warning from the EU about a disinformation on X, formerly known as Twitter, regarding the Hamas attack on Israel. The formal warning alleged the disinformation circulated on Musk's social media platform includes fake news and repurposed old images. If Musk fails to appropriately moderate the content on his site, X revenues could incur a fine of 6% or an EU blackout under new laws. Thierry Breton, an EU commissioner, urged Musk to ensure a prompt, accurate and complete response to the letter within the next 24 hours.
The efforts on the constitutional recognition of Indigenous Australians are still continuing. The first attempt started in late 1930, but we have not been successful. The referendum will be held this Saturday on the 14th of October. We have Freddie Murphy reporting.
Movements on Indigenous recognition was started in the late 1930s by William Cooper, but really gained traction in 1967, when over 90% of Australians voted to include the Indigenous population in census data, allowing for essential laws to be made for Indigenous people. Then came Mabo in 1992, whose native title lawsuit led to the High Court recommending constitutional recognition. However, this never came to be.
For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, we say sorry.
After Kevin Rudd apologised in 2008, Julia Gillard would form an expert panel 2 years later to advise on constitutional recognition. Their recommendations would form the basis of 2015's Kirribilli Statement, written by Indigenous leaders. This led to the establishment of the Referendum Council, which conducted local dialogues from the end of 2016 until days before the First Nations Constitutional Convention in 2017. The 4-day event hosted over 250 Indigenous representatives who wrote the Uluru Statement from the Heart, advocating for truth-telling, treaty, and a voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution. In May 2022, an Indigenous-led ad campaign called for the voice to Parliament to become an issue in the upcoming election, which was rejected by then Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Anthony Albanese's Labor Party went on to win the election later that month and pledged to hold a referendum by the end of 2023.
A proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve?
He proposed the referendum question in March, and a few weeks later, Peter Dutton announced the Liberals would officially oppose the voice. At the end of May, the House of Representatives passed the referendum bill, with the Senate following a few weeks later, confirming we'd be heading to the polls. So, when would that be?
Today I announce that referendum day will be the 14th of October.
Freddie Murphy with that report. We're heading to a short break. See you in a couple of minutes.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Edmund Coleman.
And I'm Taylor Saggrove. On to international news now. We're joined by reporter Jada Canizo.
Thanks for having me, guys. US President Joe Biden has reiterated his support for Israel and described a Hamas attack leading to over 1,000 deaths as an act of sheer evil. In a televised speech from the White House, Mr. Biden has confirmed that at least 14 US citizens are among the many hostages taken during last week's attack. The offensive saw a barrage of rocket strikes on Israeli cities and Hamas gunmen cross the border from Gaza and has led to more than 900 deaths in Gaza in retaliatory airstrikes. President Biden has said that Hamas does not represent the legitimate aspirations of the people of Gaza. Take a look at Biden speaking earlier today.
Clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination.
Dozens of people have been killed and injured in a military air raid on a refugee camp in northern Myanmar near its border with China. Local media have confirmed that at least 29 people have died at the camp in the northern state of Kachin, which houses thousands of people displaced by decades of conflict. The camp is not far from the base used by the Kachin Independence Army, which has been engaged in a long-running conflict with the Myanmar military. The attack is the latest in a wave of violence that has swept Myanmar following the 2021 military coup, which saw its democratically elected government overthrown. Finland suspects damage to an underwater gas pipeline to Estonia may have been an act of deliberate sabotage. Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo says that both countries are investigating after the pipeline was forced to shut down following a sudden drop in pressure. Russian sabotage in retribution for Finland joining NATO in April has been suspected as the cause. Norway says that its radars detected a probable explosion in the area over the weekend, but the blast was smaller than two last year on the Nord Stream pipeline, also linked to Russian interference. In the US, a Minnesota man has broken his own record to grow the world's heaviest pumpkin, a 1.2-ton gourd named Michael Jordan. 43-year-old teacher Travis Gineja set the record for the US heaviest pumpkin last year, but has now edged 20 kilograms ahead of the previous international record, held by a man in Italy. The pumpkin had to be flown in to be weighed at the 50th International World Pumpkin Weigh-Off in California. Mr. Gineja, who has taken away a prize of $30,000 says he named the pumpkin after basketballer Michael Jordan because the year it was grown matches Jordan's jersey number 23. New research has suggested that orangutan killings on the island of Borneo are continuing in large numbers, despite nearby efforts to protect them. Researchers have found evidence that direct killings by humans may have occurred in as many of 30% of villages in the Indonesian Kalimantan region, which makes up most of the island. The study, in which more than 400 villagers were interviewed, comes over 10 years after research that found between 2,000 and 3,000 orangutans were being killed each year.
And now back to the President Joe Biden's pledge of the US support for Israel. A short time ago, reporter Pentry Buckley spoke to Simon Frankel Pratt, a lecturer of political science at the University of Melbourne.
Historically, the US has been supportive of past Israeli security actions quite firmly, but within certain limits. Israeli military activities, especially in the Gaza Strip, often come at the cost of many Palestinian lives lost. Palestine, both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, is very densely populated. It's primarily built up areas, and large numbers of bystander dead can be incendiary and destabilizing within the broader Middle East region. So the US would also prefer that its allies not publicly violate the laws of war in front of the global public. That said, generally speaking, the US has been pretty consistently behind Israeli actions. And I think that this is even more so the case now with the massive death toll, with the massive number of Israeli civilian dead. I don't think that the US is willing or possibly even able to restrain Israel to the same degree that it might have in the past. And domestically, I think President Biden would be under a lot of pressure anyway to take a strong stand in solidarity. And this goes as well for other US and Israeli allies. I don't think that there's a lot of desire and probably a lot of scope for really doing anything more than saying that they have humanitarian concerns and that they hope that Israel will follow the laws of armed conflict.
And you touched on some of the things that were different about these particular attacks. One of the things that we have seen is alarming videos and reports of hostage taking on quite a large scale. Is that something we've seen before?
So certainly taking hostages is a pretty standard part of the terrorism playbook. And certainly it is featured extensively in the Israel-Palestine conflict and elsewhere. Israel in particular is very sensitive to soldiers and citizens being captured and held hostage. And previously with the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange, Hamas was able to secure the release of over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including some responsible for deadly violence, in exchange for only that one soldier. So I believe that Hamas intended to do this again, to take more prisoners and to use this to secure a larger prisoner release. I think, though, I'm not sure that the current Israeli government at this time is all that open to negotiation. There may be a sense in which Hamas has actually become a victim of their own success, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And just in relation to some of those images that we've been seeing, do you think journalists need to take precautions in terms of sharing those things on social media or any other sort of incendiary reports that have been made?
Absolutely. I've noticed a very high noise to signal ratio on this issue, and nowhere worse than on X, formerly known as Twitter. There are many claims. It's certainly a very well confirmed fact that many acts of barbaric murder and violence have taken place in this attack. But some claims, like claims of mass beheadings, mass sexual assault, these are especially incendiary. And I think that sharing them without confirmation can make this traumatic episode even more traumatic. It can lead to violence, and it can reduce our overall credibility when we try to link our moral positions to clear statements of fact.
We're heading to another short break. We'll be back with a look at social media addiction. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Taylor Saggrove.
And I'm Edmund Coleman. New South Wales has announced that all phones will be banished from classrooms within public schools, including at recess and lunchtimes. The ban is expected to help the current screen and social media addiction crisis within young people across Australia. These days, excessive use of social media is one of those issues increasingly linked with mental health, with students spending up to 9 hours a day on their phones. Reporter Amelia Turnbull has the story.
Our phones, our computers and social media have become an absolute pivotal part of our everyday lives. We check our phones before going to bed and we check them again when we wake up. We are constantly connected to the world. According to recent studies, the average user spends approximately 4 to 5 hours per day on their phones. Shockingly, for adolescents, this number can soar to over 9 hours daily. Daniel Zarate, a PhD candidate in addiction psychology, has said that addiction has evolved and we no longer need to take something in order to have a dependency.
The initial idea is that addiction was in relation to substances. But as research advances, we know that we don't even need to take something to produce that buzz and that excitement. It could be coming from things like, again, scrolling, gaming.
Social media giants have features designed to keep users engaged, such as algorithms paired with endless scrolling and notifications, all which contribute to the cycle of dependency. Mental health professionals are expressing their concern for students and young adults. With the increase in screen time, they are also seeing an increase in patients with depression, anxiety, and feelings of being lonely. Efforts to combat this growing issue are on the rise, with schools and organisations introducing digital wellness programs to educate both students and parents about healthy screen habits. But with everything being online, including entire university courses, the battle against screen addiction seems lost. Amelia Turnbull, RMIT News.
Reporter Amelia Turnbull with that story there. The Victorian Government's development body has recently committed to addressing the risk of wildlife along the new Edgar Road extension in Epping. This comes after Wildlife Victoria emphasised the need to protect kangaroo safety in the region. At the desk, we have reporter for the North Central Review, Grace Frost, to tell us more. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So what can you tell us about the risks to wildlife in the Whittlesea Shire?
Yeah, so what we know is that the northern region is a major growth corridor. We've got a lot of development going on there. And in the last 3 years, wildlife death in the northern region has increased by 41%. And to put that in perspective too, 43% of all those cases, of all the deaths and injury to wildlife are caused by vehicle collisions. So yeah, a major concern in that region.
Yes, a lot. You just said the current death toll in the region. What is the effect of the extension been along that Edgar Road?
Yeah, so Edgar's Road, for people who aren't aware as well, there's a new extension in Epping between Rockfield Road and O'Hearns, and it's pretty much to help residents link straight to the freeway. Great in I guess, ideation of it, not so much when there's not kangaroo management plans put in place before that development, which has just left kangaroos who had inhabited that area in the firing line of bidirectional traffic and, yeah, ultimately to suffer really horrific deaths and injuries. Yeah.
They currently already have wildlife rescue in the area.
Yeah.
How much pressure has that been on the community?
Oh, I mean, you know, we can talk about wildlife rescuers, but I think something that's not mentioned enough is that these rescuers are all volunteers. They're self-funded, and the pressure that's been put on them when developments are put in place without regulations beforehand to ensure that these wildlife are protected is, just putting these rescuers in serious amounts of, I can't even describe it, the amount of call-outs that go to these rescuers, that they just have to go and constantly put their own money toward fuel, toward helping it. It's just insane, yeah.
How did you become interested in the story?
Yeah, so actually there's a wildlife rescuer in the area, Christy. She's very well known. She owns her own rescue and rehabilitation centre. She put a call out on Facebook filming after 3 kangaroos had crossed the road. The mother was hit. Her joey fell out of the pouch, broke her back. Both of them had to be euthanized, and the other joey ended up being orphaned. So she was absolutely just so frustrated by what she'd seen, the fact that these kangaroos had just been left to die in that way. So she put it on Facebook. Wildlife Victoria ended up hearing about it, and then they contacted us at the review to follow up and just see why things were going that way. So
obviously that has triggered a response from the Victorian government. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, we can say some really good things that Development Victoria, who are putting this development in place, they've seen Wildlife Victoria's call-outs, they've seen council call-outs, they've started putting in fencing, they've started putting in signage, they've looked at an ecologist to see what they can do for the kangaroos. But the ultimate of this is not looking at this case, but future cases, and that a kangaroo management plan, wildlife management plans need to be put in place before these events happen to protect the wildlife in the first place. Not just waiting for it to happen and then put some signs up, because we all know that none of us really take into account kangaroo signs at the end of the day. So yeah, it's about the long term of it, and hopefully Development Victoria take this into account for next time.
Well, it's great work that you're doing, so thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you very much.
That's all for the show. We'll be back at 4:30 on Channel 31. We'll have more news from Australia and around the world.
We'll also have the latest in sport and weather. See you then. We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which the university stands. We respectfully recognise elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to Newsline.
Broadcasting live from the Media Precinct at RMIT Melbourne.
I'm Edmund Coleman.
And I'm Taylor Sadgrove.
Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm Edmund Coleman.
And I'm Taylor Sadgrove.
Today on the program, the Israel-Hamas conflict continues to spiral and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese meets at Uluru.
Also, the architects of the disturbing video that targeted Indigenous Senator Lydia Thorpe have been exposed.
A teenage boy has been arrested in Melbourne's west after being caught speeding down a highway on the wrong side of the road.
Griffith University has released its annual climate change survey. Details on that later in the show, but first to today's news.
The federal government has confirmed the death of Australian grandmother Galit Carboni as the Israel-Hamas conflict continues to spiral out of control. Ms. Carboni was killed by members of Hamas during the Palestinian militant group's attack on Israel last weekend. Israel military have confirmed the death toll from the deadliest military attack in Israel's history has passed 1,000. Retaliatory Israeli airstrikes continue to batter Gaza, the most densely populated region on Earth and home to 2.3 million people. The UN has warned of a looming humanitarian crisis as US President Joe Biden declared support for Israel and confirmed hostages taken by Hamas include 14 US citizens. Hundreds gathered outside Melbourne State Library last night to show solidarity with Palestine.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese sat with elders and Indigenous communities at Uluru before the upcoming referendum voice. Attending the Imma ceremony, which traditional owners danced and sung, Albanese urged no voters to reconsider their stance as the referendum date nears. Joining hands with more than a dozen women, Albanese sat behind the copy of the Uluru Statement of the Heart, evoking an emotional response. He was accompanied by a federal member of the Lingari, Marion Skimore, Indigenous leader Noel Pearson, and Chief Executive of the Central Land Council, Les Turner. Australians are set to vote Saturday, October 14th, where they will be asked to vote yes or no on whether the Constitution should be altered to recognise the first people of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Despite Prime Minister Albanese's continued support for the Yes campaign, the polls are currently suggesting a win for the No campaign.
Forensic analysis undertaken by ABC investigative journalists has exposed the likely architects of a disturbing video that targeted Indigenous Senator Lydia Thorpe. In the video, a masked man denigrates the Indigenous Senator and performs a Nazi salute while burning the Aboriginal flag. The video sparked national outrage after it was posted to Twitter, with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese saying far-right extremist views have no place in discourse in Australian political life. The two men believed to be behind the video are members of the white supremacist group, the National Socialist Network. The video was posted to Twitter on an anonymous account and has been since deleted. The AFP are currently investigating the matter.
17-year-old boy has been arrested after driving on the wrong side of the road at high speeds in Melbourne's west. The car pursuit that began around 9:30 Tuesday morning occurred after police responded to a sedan travelling south on Midland Highway without plates. Exceeding speeds of 120 kilometres in a 60 zone, the vehicle evaded police intercepting a Warrata Road, Huntley, before occupants fled on foot into a factory in Guardseed Street, Bendigo.
Griffith University has released its annual Climate Action Survey, revealing the majority of Australians do not currently see climate change as an extremely serious threat. 57% of respondents said they have begun to feel the effects of climate change. However, only 15% of Australians believe climate change is an extremely serious problem now. 8% of people believe the effect of climate change will be felt within the next decade. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned the Earth will cross a critical warning threshold within the next decade. The UN says an immediate and drastic shift away from fossil fuels is needed to hold warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Comedian, writer and actor Cal Wilson has died in Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney, aged 53. The New Zealander who moved to Australia in 2003 is best known for her work in Spicks and Specks, Good News Week and most recently the Australian Bake Off, Great Australian Bake Off. Her management agency announced her death today, saying her generosity, talent and friendship have been constants in the Australian comedy scene. Wilson is survived by her husband Chris and her son Digby, and our thoughts are with them.
Elon Musk has been issued a warning from the EU about disinformation on X, formerly known as Twitter, regarding the Hamas attack on Israel. The formal warning alleged the disinformation circulated on Musk's social media platform includes fake news and repurposed old images. If Musk fails to appropriately moderate the content on his site, X revenues could incur a fine of 6% of annual revenue or an EU blackout under new laws. And on to our next story now. This week, the Ballarat International Photo Biennale has been making international headlines after starting the world's first Artificial Intelligence Photography Award. The prize is called Prompted Peculiar. The organisers of the festival hope the prize will bring debate about what the difference between photography and what is being called promptography. Joining us is photographer and photojournalist Mads Ruharek.
Hello.
Thanks very much for joining us, Mads.
No worries.
So the image that won the award is called Twin Sisters in Love. What do you make of the image and why do you think it won?
I think it's an incredibly creative and an imaginative image. It's interesting because it's a nod to sort of historical 4x5 large format imagery. So it's incredibly modern in its process, but it's actually a nod to older photography. But then with the difference being this imaginative, creative octopus in the image. So I think it's an interesting image to win, and it really utilizes the medium.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that it ties to earlier photo work. So the first solely photo exhibition organised by the Society of Arts and held in London in 1852 was highly controversial at the time because people didn't consider photography to be an artwork. Do you feel that's the same debate happening now, or are we seeing something different going on?
Well, I think that photography is a form of art. It's a visual medium. It absolutely differs from something like painting, but I think it's under the umbrella of art. So I think that most audience members do see it in a similar way to other art forms.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, artists such as, Andy Warhol, Ai Weiwei have always paid other makers to create their art. Does this differ at all? Is that the lack of human element that makes it so controversial for people?
Perhaps. I think it's people are also within the photography industry can often get a little bit held down by process. I think art has always embraced new mediums, change, controversial things. So I think within the industry, it's not actually sort of that controversial. But from an outside perspective, maybe it's sort of wild to see this new modern process.
Earlier this year, the Sony World Photography Awards went to an AI image, and the photographer turned down the award when he confessed that it wasn't an actual photo. Do you expect to see the boundary between photography and so-called promptography start to blur?
I think it already is blurring in some ways, but then also it's important to remember that promptography or AI is taking its cues from photography, the same way that that initial image, the twin sisters, is taking its cues from historical photography. So it's already blurring. I think that it's incredibly important to be transparent, though, about the creation. So I think that photographer needed to say that it was AI from the get-go. And that transparency is obviously more important for photojournalism, I think, but also for fine art, so the audience knows what they're looking at.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Mads. Cheers for joining us. That was photographer and photojournalist Mads Reharek.
We're heading to a short break just now. We'll be back with Victorian news and later sports and weather. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Edmund Coleman.
And I'm Taylor Sagrove. On to Victorian news now. We're joined by reporter Jada Canizo.
Thanks, Taylor. Monash University have just released a study into correlation between light and mental health that states it's about getting bright light in the day and darkness at night. The study was led by Associate Professor Sean Kane from Monash School of Psychological Science and the Turner Institute for Brain and Mental Health in Melbourne, and it's the largest study ever on light. The study, which had 87,000 participants, collected light exposure through wristband sensors. It found that high exposure to light at night could increase the risk of depression by 30%, while daytime exposure, particularly to sunlight, could decrease risk by 20%. Victorian doctors will be asking patients to sign a petition that will support the scrap of a new tax grab. The petition, driven by an alliance of national doctors groups, hopes to protect all general practitioners from inclusion in the current payroll tax and stop the government from conducting retrospective reviews. The Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, Australian GP Alliance and the Primary Care Business Council are leading the campaign. With less than a week remaining before the referendum on the Voice to Parliament, recent polls put Victoria's support for the Voice at 46%. Tasmania is currently the only state polling with majority support for the Voice at 56%, according to Resolve's latest polls. The Southern Hemisphere's largest swap meet is due to take place in Ballarat has been cancelled for a fourth consecutive year. The Ballarat swap meet was started in 1989 by the city's Rotary clubs, but has struggled to find a location suitable for its tens of thousands of attendees. The swap meet, where stallholders and sell and exchange knickknacks, raising money for charity in the process, used to take place at the site near the city's airport between 2015 and 2020. With that site now slated for development, organisers have once again had to cancel the event, normally held in February, for the fourth year since the pandemic, but are holding out hope for 2025. That's all the Victorian news we have today. Back to you, Edmund.
We're now heading to a package from Queen Vic. Here it is.
Some major deals are being done at the Queen Vic market. The City of Melbourne and Landlease are partnering on a $1.7 billion renewal. But some market goers, like Mary Lou Howie, the daughter of a former trader, are worried their historic character is slipping away.
Now, change happens. We all know change happens. But the lack of consultation is gobsmacking. They're doing all of this, and now they're having consultation.
The renewal project includes a conversion of the car park into public space and the building of 3 high-rise residential and office towers on Franklin Street to the south. Planning Professor Michael Buxton says that this kind of intensive development is not in keeping with the market's heritage value.
What's going on all over the city, changing the nature of the city centre and introducing a high-rise character everywhere, basically. The area just behind that is one of the densest high-rise towers, residential towers in the world.
And a small commitment to affordable housing at 15% of new units, not enough.
To try to justify this by saying it's providing additional housing and additional affordable dwellings is a very long bow.
The city's housing developments are focused here on Franklin Street, and the former shops behind me on the right, currently used as storage, will be reopened. But there have been concerns already. Traders say they've been given 6 months to leave and are expected to bear the costs. There's also a large homeless population on Franklin Street, and there's been no indication of where they will live after redevelopment starts.
It's just a centre where they all gather, I think, on Franklin Street, which allows for services to access them. The soup kitchen goes there, etc., etc. I don't know where they'll move them on to.
On the question of rough sleepers on Franklin Street in particular, the City of Melbourne directed inquiries to Lendlease, and Lendlease said to speak to the city. Although a public consultation is now taking place, it seems some of the market's old character is on its way out. Henry Buckley, RMIT.
That was Henry Buckley with that report. We'll be back after with weather and sport. See you soon.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Edmund Coleman.
And I'm Taylor Saggrove. This month is Shocktober, Ambulance Victoria's campaign to improve cardiac arrest response time. To mark the launch of the campaign, 8-year-old Lucy was reunited with her first responder who helped save her life. Reporter Annabelle Fleming has the details.
It's been 4 months since 8-year-old Lucy Harler suffered a near-fatal cardiac arrest. Today, she reunites with the first responders who helped save her life.
Dear Caitlin, thank you for helping to save my life and for being the coolest ambos ever. Mum and Dad think you are pretty special too.
Lucy's mother, Sarah Harler, was the first to find her daughter unresponsive. Having recently undergone CPR training at work, Sarah was able to perform CPR until an ambulance arrived.
To come in and find her unresponsive was quite a shock.
The paramedics say that Sarah's quick action will have made all the difference in Lucy's full recovery.
She's a miracle, a real blessing. We're really grateful for her, and we even see God's hand in all of this, and that lots of people were praying for her and things like that.
Research from Ambulance Victoria shows a person is 3 times more likely to survive a cardiac arrest if they receive CPR before an ambulance arrives. The paramedics who treated the 8-year-old were moved to tears to see young Lucy in full health.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe what we saw initially, and seeing her happy and well, it will be literally the highlight of our careers. Yeah.
This reunion marks the start of Ambulance Victoria's Shocktober campaign, trying to improve survival rates from cardiac arrests.
Ambulance Victoria is encouraging everyone to download the Good Sam app, which sends out alerts to civilians during an emergency.
Sarah Harler's message was to urge other parents to brush up on their CPR training. You never know when or who you may need to help save. Annabelle Fleming, Newsline.
That was Annabelle Fleming there with that lovely report. Now it's time for sport. Reporter Lauren Richardson joins us with the details.
The Palestinian soccer team has withdrawn from a warm-up clash with the Socceroos in Malaysia next month. Secretary-General of the Palestinian Football Association, Firas Abul Hilal, said his national team was unable to compete due to the drastic events in Palestinian territories. Mr. Hilal said the team would be unable to reach Malaysia, as it would require the need to travel through a crossing between Jordan and the Palestinian territories undergoing repeated closures. Palestine has been scheduled to play the Merdeka Cup, a friendly tournament in Malaysia held this week. Liv Golf's bid to earn world ranking points has been denied by the official World Golf Ranking Board. The board cited that it could not equitably measure the 48-man league against the 24 other leagues. This means the Saudi-financed Golf League will play for cash only. Liv responded saying the decision means professional golf is now without a true or global scoring and ranking system. The Liv Golf Series, of which Australian ex-golfer and entrepreneur Greg Norman is CEO, and has been mired in controversy since its inception. The tour has been labelled by some as unseemly and a money grab, and criticised by others for sports washing. The AFL trade period continues to develop on day 3, with major moves imminent and big names expected to change jumpers for the coming season. After securing Todd Goldstein on Monday and Ben Mackay on Tuesday, Essendon looks set to secure Saints star Jade Gresham. It is unclear what the Saints will receive in return for the former pick 18, who requested the move to Essendon under free agency. Sydney's offer for Melbourne ruckman Brodie Grundy was quickly rejected. Melbourne are crushing Sydney's pick 25 for the former Magpie. Fremantle has said the club remains confident in their less build despite the growing exodus of players, including talented wingman Liam Henry, who looks set to don the red and white and black in the Saints next year. Collingwood would reportedly offer pick 19 for Fremantle roving forward Lachie Schultz. Werribee Park National Equestrian Centre will play host to the 37th World Team Championship for horse-mounted games. Mounted games involve riders competing against each other with distinctive rules and fierce spirit. The truly unique events include throwing socks in bins, using spears to burst balloons, and tossing socks into bins. Teams will arrive in Melbourne from 11 different countries to battle it out, and is billed to be the experience of a lifetime. Australian Jamie Carr, the top-ranked female jockey in the world and former mounted games contestant, will be the event's patron. Let's take a look at the weather now. Starting with tomorrow's forecast for Australia's capital cities. It's going to be partly cloudy in Sydney, following showers at night with a top of 31. It's mostly sunny in the mornings for Canberra, but with showers from the afternoon reaching a top of 24. Even warmer in Brisbane with sunny skies and a top of 26. Partly cloudy in Darwin with a top of 32. It'll be sunny in Perth with, and they'll see a top of 26. Down south now, Adelaide is having showers in the morning and turning sunny for the rest of the day with a top of 17. And mostly cloudy in Hobart with a top of 16. Now, looking to the week ahead in Melbourne. It'll be raining from the morning in Melbourne tomorrow with a top of 17 degrees and a low of 10 after rain stops in the evening. There will be a top of 17 on Thursday, 16 on Friday, 18 on Saturday and 14 on Sunday, with rain and partly cloudy expected to continue from the beginning of next week. That's all for weather. Back to you, Edmund.
Thank you, Lauren. Hundreds of university staff in Victoria are on strike, demanding more secure work and fairer conditions. Maddie Lowe-Booth has the story.
Hundreds of university workers are walking off the job.
I have both been a casual, fixed term and now very recently an ongoing position at University of Melbourne. The system is broken.
For many, it's a necessary step after years of insecure work and untenable workloads.
Too many brilliant scholars and teachers go from casual contract to casual contract, and I think the whole sector needs to shift.
At the University of Melbourne, over 500 tutorials were cancelled as union members strike for the second time in just 2 months. It's the longest industrial action the Sandstone University has seen in over 160 years. They're joined by strikes at RMIT and Monash University.
Across the state, all university staff are being squeezed for wages, workloads, conditions, treatment of casuals, deliberately so that universities can return to the black.
Students are affected with classes cancelled just weeks away from exams and final assessments.
One of the things that you'd often hear is that the strikes impact students, but I would say, to counter that, the actual long-term impact of the conditions under which academics currently work is way worse than, a week-long strike.
6 of Victoria's 8 universities, La Trobe, Melbourne, Monash, RMIT, Swinburne and Victoria University, have been in enterprise bargaining negotiations for months. Union members are seeking pay rises in line with current inflation, but this isn't just about a cost of living crisis.
Conditions are also really bad, and that is one of the major things that are driving staff. So while we desperately need a wage increase, I think that alone won't be enough to get the agreement over the line.
As industrial action continues, university staff and students are hoping their working and learning conditions will improve. Madeline Lowe-Booth, Newsline.
That was Maddie Lowe-Booth with that report. Thanks so much for joining our show today. I'm Edmund Coleman.
And I'm Kayla Saggrove. Thanks for joining us on Channel 31.
Yeah.